The invitation of this period is to contemplate the healing at Bethesda. So in a moment I'm going to read you this short passage from John chapter 5 verses 2 to 8. I'll read it through once and then I'm going to give you a moment to think about who you might wish to be in that story as I'm going to read it through to you again a second time. So if you like, we're going to contemplate this particular scene at Bethesda, and the invitation is to take a perspective from which to experience it. So as you'll see when I read it through the first time, you could be the man, the invalid, who wants to get into the pool, or you could be somebody else who effectively is an observer on that occasion, or you could even choose to be Jesus in this scene when we come back to do it the second time. And as we go through it, I just want you to be in the moment when I read it the second time. We're going to take a moment and I'll prompt you to do it, to really sort of set the scene, to picture what's happening, and then to hear the dialogue and the responses. And then at the end of that, we'll have also a process of review, but I'll do that when we get to it. So for now, I'm just going to read to you John 5, verses 2 to 8. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. So I'm going to read that to you again. And as I say, I'd just like you to take a moment to think about from what perspective you'd like to experience these verses and this story. Whether you'd like to be the invalid, somebody who's observing what's happening, or Jesus himself. So this is John chapter 5, verses 2 to 8. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. So begin by setting that scene. Picture the pool. Picture those 5 colonnades. Imagine they're stone. What kind of day is it? Is there heat perhaps coming off this stone? Or is it early in the morning and it's still cool around the pool? Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. So picture people around this pool. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. Jesus sees him lying there, and he's learned that he'd been in this condition for a long time. So he approaches him and asks him, "Do you want to get well?" The invalid replied, "Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." We're told that at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. Now I'd invite you to reflect back over that time of prayer. You may wish to do it again, and to reflect on what it revealed. To get underneath that, you could ask yourself, was there a word or a phrase that particularly struck you, something about the story that really stood out to you? Were you aware of your feelings? Did you have a sense of peace, love, trust, emotions of sadness, discouragement, hope, longing? And if you did have an emotional response, what did those feelings say to you? You might also ask yourself if you're more aware of God's presence in some way, and how. And whether there's something to have come from this that you think it would be helpful to return to in another prayer period, in which case it's really worth jotting that down so you remember to do so. And after you've spent some time reflecting back over praying through that text, I'd suggest that you finish by asking God for any grace you may feel you need to step out where He would lead, and that you give thanks for what He has revealed.